Hey everybody, welcome back to the 5-Minute English Teacher, where we break down big ideas fast. Now today, I'm not going to lie to you, we got a tough one. We're going to talk about Rikki-Tikki-Tavi as a colonial allegory. Is it a colonial allegory? We're going to talk about that. Is it a political message of a short story? So we'll get into that today, so let's jump right in. So first things first, what is an allegory? Many of you have heard this term, some of you have not heard this term. It's a fancy term and it means a story, poem, or picture that can be interpreted to reveal a hidden meaning, typically of a moral or political one. So when you're reading something or you're watching a film and there's something going on the surface, but under the surface it has a deeper, more philosophical meaning. Now, Animal Farm is a great example of that. If you ever encountered Animal Farm by George Orwell, it's a famous fable allegory for revolution and how the pursuit of power is often feigned for idealism. So essentially in the book, it's a farm and there's a bunch of animals on the farm, and each animal represents a symbol or an allegory of something that's happening in real life during George Orwell's political time. And so that serves as an allegory. Another famous one that you guys are probably more familiar with is the Lorax. If you see in this picture to the right here, the Lorax is a fable allegory for deforestation or the destruction of ecological settings for financial profit. So in the story, there's this protector of the trees, the Lorax, and then there's all these beautiful trees that are being cut down only for profit, and they lose their beauty. So the fun story is actually an allegory for something deeper and more political in nature. So what about Rudyard Kipling in his story Rikki-Tikki-Tavi? And is it about empire? Well, Kipling was born in 1865, where the British controlled India. So his work often reflected colonial settings and values and supported the British Empire in many of his writings. But as we could see, and we talked about in our last episode about the villains of the story, the snakes were just being snakes. The snakes were kind of representative of something deeper. So let's talk about that. Here's an allegorical interpretation of Rikki-Tikki-Tavi. Rikki, the foreigner coming into the garden, he would serve as a symbol of British rule and order. Naga-Nagayana, on the other hand, would be natives of resistance or chaos. So they're the ones who inhabit the garden naturally. Here comes Rikki to kind of shake things up, and that serves as an allegory of what was happening in India at the time of Rudyard Kipling's life. Now, the garden itself, colonized land to be protected. So you see the allegory there? Now, why do some critics see colonial messaging? Well, Rikki comes to restore order by killing the native predators. Similar to kind of what happened during the British colonization of India, Britain came in and imposed its rules, its orders, its political agenda on the Indian people, even sometimes killing the native people there. The British family remains passive but benefits in the Rikki-Tikki-Tavi story, similar to what happened of British settlers moving to India during British colonization. Now, nature is only safe after Rikki wins. So same thing with British colonization of India. Was India safe? Was it good until the British arrived? Many critics would say that British arrival in India changed things dramatically, just like it did in the story. So, is that the only way to read this story? Now, I'm reading Rikki-Tikki-Tavi in a very complex way, but it's also just a story about courage and loyalty. So on the surface, again, we have those themes. There's talking animals, so clearly it's a fable in structure. There's no direct political speeches or agendas, but when we read literature, we read below the surface. We see some of the symbols and what they might represent on a deeper level. Now, both readings can coexist. Stories can have layers and meaning. What the author intended doesn't always equal or isn't always a valid interpretation. You have to decide what resonates most with you, but if I use some of that text evidence, I can prove my argument of colonialization that's happening in the Rikki-Tikki-Tavi story. So, questions you should think about as you read literature moving forward, and especially Rikki-Tikki-Tavi, is who's holding the power in the story? What does the garden really represent? Is violence always justified in defense of peace? These are big overarching questions that a mature reader of literature would really think about and understand and begin to see the deeper meanings and the deeper layers that Rikki-Tikki-Tavi and Rudyard Kipling in general had for the story. So thanks so much for joining me. This was my big mind idea kind of flow, and I hope that you enjoyed it. If you disagree, I totally understand. But thanks so much for watching. If this video helped you, please give it a like, subscribe, drop a comment down below. Teachers, if you want this lecture, as well as student notes that go with it, please visit my TPT store, which can be found below in the description. All right, see you next time. Bye.